My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 32 years old, and I thought I was just going to my grandmother's 85th birthday. Family, cake, and memories. But that night, my husband locked the car doors, looked me in the eye, and whispered, "Rachel, something's wrong." That was the moment everything I thought I knew about my family collapsed. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you are watching from. The silence from my family wasn't a loud, angry thing. It was quiet, like dust settling in an abandoned house. For 3 years, my father, Richard, hadn't called me on my birthday. My sister, Vanessa, communicated only through passive-aggressive likes on other people's social media posts. The last time I'd spoken to her directly was at a cousin's wedding, where she'd commented that my dress was brave, a word that felt like a tiny, poisoned dart. We hadn't had a fight. There was no single event I could point to. We had simply drifted apart, our relationship eroding under the constant, subtle pressure of their disapproval of my life, my choice to move 2 hours away, my marriage to a man they considered too quiet and observant, my job that wasn't as flashy as the ones they admired. So when my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon, and my father's name flashed on the screen, my heart didn't leap with joy. It seized with suspicion. I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a deep breath to steady my voice. "Dad?" I said, trying to sound casual. "Rachel, sweetheart. How are you?" His voice was booming with a warmth that felt entirely foreign. It was the voice he used for business associates, not for the daughter he'd once forgotten to pick up from her high school graduation ceremony. "I'm good," I said slowly. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay. It's wonderful," he boomed. "Listen, we're throwing a big surprise party for your grandma Eleanor. Her 85th! Can you believe it? The whole family is coming. It's at the old house, this Saturday." I felt a genuine pang of warmth at the mention of my grandmother. Grandma Eleanor was the reason I ever went back. She was the steady, gentle hand that had guided me through a childhood marked by my parents' chilly indifference. She taught me how to bake bread, her worn, flour-dusted hands patiently guiding mine. When my father and sister made me feel invisible, Grandma Eleanor saw me. She was my safe place. "Of course I'll be there for Grandma," I said, my suspicion softening. "That's wonderful. Great. Your sister is organizing everything. She's done a marvelous job. Really pulled out all the stops," he added. And just like that, the cold knot of dread returned to my stomach. Vanessa organizing something wasn't a sign of family unity. It was a power play. My sister didn't do things out of love. She did them for an audience. She curated events like she curated her life, for maximum effect and personal gain. A party planned by Vanessa wasn't just a party. It was a performance, and everyone had a role to play. I suddenly felt like I was being handed a script I hadn't read. "That's nice of her," I managed to say. "It is. So we'll see you and Ethan Saturday around 6? Don't be late. The surprise is at 6:30 sharp." He hung up before I could ask any more questions. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone buzzing. A party for Grandma. It should have been simple. It should have been happy. But it felt like a summons. That evening, I told my husband, Ethan. He was sitting at our small dining table, sketching in his notebook. He was an architect, a man who saw the world in terms of structure and integrity, and he could spot a flaw in a foundation from a mile away. He listened patiently, his pencil still, his dark eyes fixed on me. When I finished, he didn't smile. He closed his notebook. "Why now?" he asked, his voice calm and even. "What do you mean?" "It's her 85th birthday. It's a big one." "I know," he said, leaning forward. "But Rachel, think about it. 3 years of near silence. Your father calls you out of the blue with a voice like a game show host. And your sister, the one who cropped you out of last year's Christmas photo, is suddenly the master of ceremonies? It feels off," I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know, Ethan, believe me, I know. But it's for Grandma Eleanor. She's the only one who ever, I can't not go. If I don't, Vanessa will use it as ammunition against me for the next decade. Rachel couldn't even be bothered to show up for her own grandmother's birthday. I can already hear it." Ethan's expression softened. He knew how deep my connection with my grandmother ran, and he knew how deep the scars from my family were. "Of course we'll go," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I just want you to be prepared. When your family suddenly acts this nice, it's usually because they want something. Just keep your eyes open." I squeezed his hand, grateful for his steadiness. "I will. We'll go. We'll wish Grandma a happy birthday. We'll eat some of Vanessa's probably catered, perfect-looking cake, and we'll leave. In and out." What could possibly happen? Ethan didn't answer. He just gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, but his eyes held a worry that I chose to ignore. I wanted to believe, just for a weekend, that my family could be normal, that this invitation wasn't a trap but an olive branch. It was a foolish hope, and deep down, I think I knew it. But the thought of seeing my grandmother's smile was enough to make me walk right into their carefully set stage. The 2-hour drive to my childhood home was filled with a tense quiet. I spent the time scrolling through old photos of my grandmother on my phone, reminding myself why I was doing this. There she was, holding my hand at my kindergarten graduation, her smile soft and proud. There she was, letting me help her in the garden, a smudge of dirt on her nose. These were the memories that anchored me, the proof of a love that was real and unconditional in a family where everything else felt transactional. Ethan drove, his hands resting lightly on the wheel, but his knuckles were white. He was quiet, but I knew he was observing everything, cataloging the details. He was my protector, and his senses were on high alert. As we turned onto the familiar street, my breath caught in my throat. The house, a sprawling 2-story colonial I'd grown up in, looked perfect, too perfect. The lawn was immaculately manicured, the hedges trimmed with geometric precision. A massive, professionally printed banner reading, "Happy 85th, Eleanor," was strung between 2 old oak trees. Dozens of silver and blue balloons were tied to the porch railing, bobbing in the gentle evening breeze. It didn't look like our home. It looked like a picture from a magazine, staged and sterile. "Vanessa has been busy," I murmured, a hollow feeling growing in my stomach. "Or she hired someone who has," Ethan replied, his eyes scanning the property as he pulled into the driveway, which was already crowded with cars. We got out, and the air was thick with the scent of cut grass and expensive perfume. We could hear the low murmur of conversation and polite laughter from the backyard. As we walked up the stone path, the front door swung open and my father stood there, beaming. "There they are," he exclaimed, pulling me into a stiff, one-armed hug that felt more like a photo opportunity than a greeting. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder, calling him son, a word he'd never used before, and that sounded jarringly false. Inside, the house was unrecognizable. All the comfortable, worn furniture I remembered had been replaced or covered. Polished surfaces gleamed under the soft lighting. Vases of white lilies — my grandmother hated lilies, she always said they smelled of funerals — were placed on every available surface. It was beautiful, but it had no soul. It wasn't Grandma Eleanor's house anymore. Then I saw my sister. Vanessa was gliding through the living room, a vision in a silk dress the color of champagne. She held a clipboard, a pen tucked behind her ear, playing the part of the flawless hostess. She saw us, and her smile, which was already bright, seemed to get even brighter, and therefore more fake. "Rachel!" "Ethan, you made it!" she chirped, kissing the air next to my cheek. "Isn't it all just wonderful? I've been working on this for months." She gestured vaguely around the room, a queen surveying her kingdom. "It's a lot, Vanessa," I said honestly. Her smile tightened for a fraction of a second. "It's what Grandma deserves. Only the best." She then turned her attention to a newly arrived couple, leaving us standing awkwardly in the entryway. We moved through the house and into the backyard, where most of the guests were gathered. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in years mingled on the patio. The conversations were hushed, the laughter restrained. It felt less like a birthday party and more like a corporate networking event. And then I saw her. My grandmother. She was sitting in a large, cushioned wicker chair near the garden, a place she had always loved. She was wearing a simple lavender dress, and a pale blue shawl was draped over her shoulders. It was the shawl I had knitted for her 5 Christmases ago. Seeing it felt like a punch to the gut. She had a small, faint smile on her face, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes, normally so bright and full of life, looked foggy, distant. She looked incredibly frail, and so quiet. As I made my way toward her, Ethan gripped my arm gently. "Look," he whispered, his voice low. "At the edges of the yard?" I followed his gaze. Standing near the back fence, partially obscured by a large maple tree, were 2 men in dark polo shirts. They weren't talking to anyone. They weren't eating or drinking. They were just watching, their arms crossed, their expressions neutral. Another man stood near the side gate doing the same thing. They were not family friends. They were not caterers. They were sentinels. "Who are they?" I whispered back, a shiver running down my spine despite the warm evening air. "I don't know," Ethan said, his jaw tight. "But they're not guests." My heart started to beat a little faster. The perfect house, my sister's theatrical performance, my father's fake warmth, and now these men standing guard. Nothing about this was right. I pushed the feeling down. I was here for my grandmother. I walked the rest of the way to her chair, forcing a bright smile onto my face, determined to pretend for her sake. that this was just a normal, happy day. I knelt on the soft grass beside my grandmother's chair, taking her hand in mine. Her skin felt thin and cool, like old parchment. Her grip, which had once been so strong and reassuring, was weak, her fingers resting limply in mine. "Grandma," I said softly. "It's Rachel. Happy birthday." She turned her head slowly, and her eyes took a moment to focus on me. A real smile finally touched her lips, a flicker of the warmth I knew so well. "Rachel, my sweet girl. You came." "Of course I came," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I was shocked by how much she had changed since I'd last seen her 6 months ago. She was thinner, her cheekbones more pronounced, and there was a fragility about her that hadn't been there before. She seemed to be swimming in her dress. "It's a big party," she murmured, looking out at the crowd with a vague, confused expression. "So many people. They're all here for you, Grandma. They all love you," she patted my hand weakly. "That's nice." Her gaze drifted away, and she seemed to recede back into the fog. The connection was gone as quickly as it had come. Ethan came over and knelt beside me. "Hello, Eleanor. You look beautiful," he said in his warm, gentle voice. Grandma Eleanor looked at him, her brow furrowed in concentration. For a terrifying moment, her eyes were blank. Then she smiled faintly. "Hello, Eric," she said, her voice a soft rasp. "It's so good of you to come." My blood ran cold. Eric. She had called him Eric. My grandmother had never, not once in the 10 years I had known Ethan, forgotten his name. She adored him. She always said his calm, steady presence was a balm for my anxious soul. For her to get his name wrong, it wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a crack in the very foundation of my world. Before I could even react, Vanessa was there, appearing as if from nowhere. She swooped in with a bright, tinkling laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, Grandma, you're so silly," she exclaimed, placing a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "This is Ethan, remember? Silly goose." She leaned down and stage whispered to me, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "She gets a little muddled in the evenings. The doctor says it's perfectly normal at her age. Just a bit of fatigue." Vanessa's explanation was too quick, too polished. It was a prepackaged lie, designed to smooth over the awkwardness and dismiss any concern. She steered the conversation away, asking Ethan a loud, meaningless question about his drive down, effectively ending our moment with Eleanor. I watched, my heart hammering against my ribs, as my grandmother seemed to shrink under Vanessa's touch, her brief spark of clarity extinguished. A little later, while I was getting my grandmother a glass of water, Ethan found me by the drink table. The sun was setting, casting long, ominous shadows across the perfect lawn. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my hands trembling slightly as I held the glass. "I saw it," he said, his voice grim. He took the glass from me, his fingers brushing against mine. "This isn't just old age, Rachel. Something is wrong." "Vanessa," said the doctor. "Vanessa is lying," he cut in, his eyes hard. "Or she's telling a version of the truth that suits her. Your grandmother isn't just muddled. She seems sedated." The word hung in the air between us, ugly and terrifying. Sedated. "No," I said, shaking my head, not wanting to believe it. "They wouldn't they?" Ethan countered, his gaze sweeping over the party. He nodded towards my father, who was laughing loudly with one of the strange men in polo shirts. "Your dad hasn't looked at his mother once since we got here. Your sister is treating her like a prop in a play. The whole house feels staged. Those men are not guests. They're security or something like it. This is not a party, Rachel. It's an event. And your grandmother is the centerpiece, but she's not the guest of honor. She's the target." Every word he said landed like a stone in my gut. He was right. I had been so desperate for it to be normal that I had been ignoring all the signs. The sterile house, my sister's saccharine performance, my father's forced cheerfulness, the silent watchers at the edge of the lawn, and now, my grandmother's vacant eyes and her forgotten memories. I looked back at her, sitting alone in her chair as the party swirled around her. Vanessa was now standing beside her, talking to some relatives and gesturing towards Eleanor as if she were presenting an exhibit at a museum. The pale blue shawl I had knitted for her looked like a shroud. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. This wasn't a celebration of her life. It felt like they were waiting for something. It felt like the end. "What do we do?" I whispered to Ethan, my voice barely audible. "We watch," he said, his expression determined. "And we wait. Let me look around. Don't let on that anything is wrong. Just stay close to your grandmother." He squeezed my arm, a silent promise of support, and then he melted back into the crowd, leaving me alone with a truth that was beginning to feel inescapable. My family was putting on a show, and I was starting to realize it was a horror story. I spent the next hour glued to my grandmother's side, a forced smile plastered on my face. I felt like a spy in my own family. Every polite conversation felt loaded with hidden meaning. Every laugh sounded like a threat. I tried to talk to Eleanor, to draw her out, but she was mostly unresponsive, drifting in and out of a drowsy awareness. She'd answer a question with a single word or just offer a weak, vague smile. Once I saw her shiver, and I pulled the blue shawl more tightly around her shoulders. She looked up at me, and for a fleeting second her eyes were clear. I saw fear in them. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker, but it was there. Then it was gone, and the fog rolled back in. Meanwhile, Ethan was a ghost. He moved through the party with a glass of sparkling water in his hand, looking for all the world like a guest making small talk. But I knew him. I could see the subtle way he angled himself to observe entryways, the way his gaze lingered on the men in polo shirts, the way he would casually drift toward the house while everyone's attention was focused on the backyard. He was gone for what felt like an eternity. My anxiety mounted with each passing minute. Vanessa announced it was almost time to cut the cake, and the guests began to gather more closely around the patio. The atmosphere grew thick with a sense of anticipation that felt sinister. Just as Vanessa was directing one of the caterers to bring out the cake, Ethan reappeared at my side. His face was pale, his expression grim. He put a hand on the small of my back, a gesture that might look affectionate to an observer, but I could feel the tension in his fingers. "Walk with me," he murmured, his voice so low it was barely a breath. Toward the side of the house. "We need to talk." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What is it? What did you find?" "Just walk." "Smile," he instructed. I did as he said, letting him guide me away from the main cluster of guests, toward the darker side of the yard near the garage. Once we were shielded by a row of tall lilac bushes, he stopped and turned to face me. The cheerful party music felt miles away. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to not react," he said, his eyes boring into mine. I was right. It's all staged. He told me what he'd found. He'd made an excuse about needing to get something from the car, which gave him a reason to be in the front of the house, away from the main event. He first checked under the front porch, pretending to tie his shoe. Tucked up against the foundation, nearly invisible in the shadows, he found them, a set of thin black cables. They weren't power lines or cable TV wires. They were discreet professional-grade cables, the kind used for surveillance equipment. They ran from a small hidden box and disappeared into the wall of the house. "They're recording this, Rachel," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Audio, maybe video. They're creating a record of her being confused and disoriented." I felt sick. My mind reeled back to Vanessa's loud, performative pronouncements about Eleanor being muddled and forgetful. She wasn't just explaining it away. She was establishing it for a hidden audience. "There's more," Ethan went on. He'd slipped back into the house through the side door that led to the laundry room. The kitchen was empty, so he took a chance. He remembered seeing my father put something in a drawer earlier. He opened it. Pushed under a stack of old dish towels, he found 2 unlabeled prescription pill bottles. One was filled with small white tablets. The other contained a fine white powder, the same tablets but crushed. "They're grinding them up and putting them in her food or drink," he said, his voice raw. "That's why she's so out of it. It's not just old age, Rachel. They are actively drugging your grandmother." I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. The image of my frail grandmother, her eyes foggy, her memories slipping away, flashed in my mind. It wasn't a natural decline. It was an assault. My own father, my own sister were poisoning her. But why? I choked out, the words tearing at my throat. Why would they do this? Ethan's face hardened. "That's the worst part. While I was in the hallway, heading back outside, I heard your father talking to one of the polo shirt guys in the study. The door was slightly ajar. I only heard a snippet, but it was enough." He paused, taking a deep breath. "The guy said, 'We're all set for the notary.' And your father replied, 'Good. Just wait for the documents after the candles. Once she signs, we can proceed.' Documents. Notary." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying speed. "Her estate," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "Her house. Her money." "Exactly," Ethan confirmed. "They're manufacturing evidence to prove she's mentally incompetent. They're sedating her, recording her confusion, and at the climax of this whole sick performance, they're going to have her sign away control of her entire life. They're going to steal everything from her, right in front of the whole family." I looked past him, back toward the patio. The cake was now on a table blazing with candles. Vanessa was helping my grandmother stand up, her arm wrapped around Eleanor's waist in a mockery of loving support. The guests were starting to sing Happy Birthday. Their voices, once festive, now sounded like a funeral dirge. My grandmother stood there, swaying slightly, a lost and bewildered look on her face, the star of a tragedy she didn't even know she was in. And my family were the villains, smiling and applauding her destruction. The sound of my family and their rented friends singing Happy Birthday was a grotesque parody. Every cheerful note felt like a shovel of dirt being thrown on my grandmother's life. I stood frozen beside the lilac bushes, the scent of the flowers thick and cloying in the air. Ethan's words echoed in my head. Surveillance, sedatives, forged papers. My own father, my own sister. The betrayal was a physical thing, a shard of ice lodging itself in my chest. My first instinct was to run, to sprint across the lawn, knock the cake from the table, and scream the truth for everyone to hear. I imagined grabbing the microphone from the small sound system Vanessa had set up and exposing them, right there, under the soft glow of the party lights. Ethan must have seen the wild desperation in my eyes. He grabbed my arms, his grip firm and grounding. "Rachel, no," he said, his voice a low, urgent command. "Look at me. Do not react. That's what they want. But we have to do something," I hissed, my voice trembling. "They're about to make her sign those papers, Ethan. They're going to steal her life. And what do you think will happen if you run out there screaming?" He countered, his logic a cold splash of water on my hysteria. "Think, Rachel. Who are those men in the polo shirts? They're not just watching. They're here for a reason. If you cause a scene, they'll stop you. They'll grab you, and your father and sister will tell everyone you're having a breakdown. They'll say you're unstable, that you've always been emotional. They have set this stage perfectly. They have an answer for everything, and right now, we are the only variable they haven't controlled. We cannot give them a reason to control us." His words hit me with the force of a physical blow because I knew he was right. I could already hear Vanessa's voice, dripping with false concern. "Oh, poor Rachel. The stress has just been too much for her." They would turn my righteous anger into a symptom of my own instability. They had planned this. They had accounted for everything except one thing, that we would figure it out and be smart about it. My rage, hot and explosive a moment ago, began to cool, hardening into something else. Something cold and sharp. Resolve. "Okay," I breathed, my tears drying on my face. "Okay, what do we do?" "We leave," he said simply. "We get out of here. We get somewhere safe and we call the police. It's the only way. We can't fight them here. We are outnumbered, and they hold all the cards. The only way to win is to get off their playing board entirely." The thought of leaving my grandmother alone in that house, surrounded by predators, was agonizing. It felt like an abandonment, a betrayal in itself. "I can't just leave her here, Ethan. I can't. Leaving is the only way to save her," he insisted, his eyes locking onto mine, willing me to understand. "If we stay, we're trapped with her. If we leave, we can bring help. Real help. We have to be her advocates from the outside. You have to trust me, Rachel." I looked over his shoulder back at the party. My grandmother was now seated, and Vanessa was placing a piece of cake with a single, unlit candle in front of her. The singing had stopped. The air was thick with anticipation. It was almost time. The notary was probably waiting just inside the house. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Ethan was right. A frontal assault was suicide. We had to be tactical. We had to be smarter. "Okay," I said again, my voice stronger this time. "What's the plan?" "We walk out," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper as he laid it out. "We don't run, we walk, we smile. We find your sister, and you tell her you have a splitting headache and you need to go. It's simple, it's believable, and it's not dramatic. We don't make a big deal of saying goodbye to everyone. We just slip out. We get in the car, we lock the doors, and we drive until we have a signal. Then we burn their whole world down." The last part he said with a ferocity that startled me. This quiet, gentle man I had married had a core of steel. He was in this fight with me, for my grandmother. He was the family I had chosen, and he was not going to let them win. "Okay," I said, nodding. A strange calm settled over me. The fear and panic were still there, but they were now packed in ice. I had a mission. Let's go get my grandmother's life back. We stepped out from behind the lilac bushes, our shoulders brushing. We were a team. As we walked back toward the light, I schooled my features into a placid, neutral expression, ready to play my part in the final act of their sick little play. Every step felt like I was walking through wet cement. The cheerful party music grated on my ears, and the smiling faces of my relatives looked like grotesque masks. I kept my eyes fixed ahead, focusing on Ethan's back as he led the way. He paused to smile and nod at an uncle, and I mirrored the gesture, my facial muscles feeling stiff and foreign. It was the longest walk of my life. We found Vanessa near the cake table, directing the flow of traffic like a general. She was basking in the glow of her own success. She saw us approaching and her smile faltered for a second, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face at the interruption. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone suggesting that it had better be. I put a hand to my temple, a gesture I'd practiced in my mind on the walk over. "I'm so sorry, Vanessa," I said, letting a note of tired regret enter my voice. "I think I have one of my bad migraines coming on. The lights are really starting to get to me. I think we need to head out before it gets worse." Her eyes narrowed slightly, searching my face for any sign of deception. For a terrifying second, I thought she didn't believe me. I could see the calculation in her eyes. Was my leaving a problem for her plan? Did she need me here as a witness? Another family member to legitimize the proceedings? Apparently, my presence was non-essential. Her expression softened back into one of exaggerated sympathy. "Oh, you poor thing," she cooed, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Of course you should go. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll give Grandma a big hug and kiss from you." "Thank you," I said, the words feeling like acid on my tongue. "I just want to say goodbye to her quickly." This was the hardest part. I walked over to my grandmother's chair. She was holding her small plate of cake, but she hadn't taken a bite. She just stared at it, her hands trembling slightly. I knelt in front of her, taking her hand. "It was cold." "Grandma," I whispered, leaning in close, shielding my mouth with my hand. "I have to go, but I need you to listen to me." Her eyes, cloudy and unfocused, shifted to my face. "I love you. Do you hear me? I love you and I will be back for you. I promise. Just hold on." I don't know if she understood, but she squeezed my hand, a flicker of pressure that was so faint I might have imagined it. It was enough. I kissed her on her soft, wrinkled cheek. It smelled faintly of lavender and the pills they were feeding her. I stood up, my heart feeling like a lead weight in my chest, and turned away before my composure could crack. Ethan was waiting for me. We began the final walk toward the front door, a gauntlet of fake smiles and empty pleasantries. "Leaving so soon?" my Aunt Carol asked, her face a mask of polite concern. "Rachel's not feeling well," Ethan answered for me, his voice smooth and steady. As we reached the entryway, my father appeared, blocking our path. He had a glass of whiskey in his hand and a broad, self-satisfied smile on his face. "Off so soon?" he boomed. "Headache," I mumbled, not meeting his eyes. He put his free hand on Ethan's shoulder, a gesture of proprietary male bonding that made my stomach twist into a knot of pure revulsion. "Well, you take care of my girl, son," he said, his voice thick with false sentiment. "We appreciate you both coming. It means the world to your grandmother." The hypocrisy was so profound, so shameless, that I almost choked. Ethan just nodded grimly. "Always," he said, his voice flat. My father stepped aside and we were free. We walked out the front door into the cool night air. We didn't look back. We walked down the stone path, each step measured and deliberate. I was hyper-aware of the windows of the house, of the possibility of watching eyes, of one of the polo-shirted men stepping out to stop us. We reached our car. Ethan unlocked it and we slid inside, the familiar scent of our own car, a small, comforting island in a sea of deceit. The moment the doors were closed, Ethan hit the lock button. The click was the loudest, most definitive sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of escape. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on the people who called themselves my family. For a moment, we just sat there in the darkness, our breathing ragged. I looked back at the house, a warm, cheerful box of light filled with the deepest kind of evil. Ethan started the car, the engine turning over with a quiet roar. He put it in reverse and backed slowly out of the driveway. He didn't turn on the headlights until we were at the end of the street. He turned to me then, his face illuminated by the green glow of the dashboard. His voice was grim. "Rachel, this isn't just a party. They're staging something with your grandma's estate." "I know," I whispered, tears finally streaming down my face. "Drive, Ethan. Just drive." The moment we were out of the neighborhood and onto the main road, the icy calm I had maintained shattered into a million pieces. A gut-wrenching sob tore from my throat, a sound of such profound grief and rage that it scared me. The entire horrifying reality of the situation crashed down on me. How could he? I wept, pounding a fist against the dashboard. How could a father do that to his own mother? How could a sister— I couldn't finish the sentence. The image of Vanessa's smiling face as she handed our drugged grandmother a piece of cake was burned into my mind. Ethan reached over and placed a hand on my knee, his touch a steady anchor in my storm of emotion. "I don't know, Rach. I don't know how people become like that. But we can't focus on that now. We have to focus on what we do next." He drove for another 10 minutes in silence, letting me cry it out. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just let me feel the full, crushing weight of the betrayal. When my sobs finally subsided into shuddering breaths, he pulled into the bright, sterile lot of a 24-hour gas station. The fluorescent lights felt harsh and exposing after the darkness of the road. "Why are we stopping?" I asked, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "We need to be in a public place with security cameras," he said, his voice all business, "and we need to make the call." He parked the car near the entrance of the convenience store, in full view of the cameras. He turned to me, his expression serious. "They didn't just let us walk out of there, Rachel. They noticed." He held up his phone. On the screen was a text message, received just minutes after we'd left. It was from a number he didn't recognize. It contained only 4 words. "Why did you leave?" A cold dread washed over me, even colder than before. "They're watching us," I whispered. "They were," Ethan corrected. "They know we're gone. They might even know we're suspicious, which means we have to move fast, before they can get those documents fully processed or hide what they've done." He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out something small and metallic, a small silver flash drive. "What is that?" I asked. "Evidence," he said. He plugged it into the USB port in the car, and then connected his phone to it. When I went back to the car earlier, I didn't just go to think. I grabbed my old phone from the glove compartment. The screen is cracked, but the camera works. My eyes widened as he started swiping through photos on his screen. "You took pictures?" "I took pictures of everything," he said grimly. He showed me. There was a clear shot of the black wires tucked under the porch, a photo of the 2 pill bottles in the kitchen drawer, one with the tablets, the other with the powder. He'd even placed a penny next to them for scale, a small detail that spoke to his incredible presence of mind, and then he showed me the last photo. It made my breath catch in my throat. It was a picture of a document, laid out on what looked like a desk in the study. He must have snapped it in the split second he'd overheard my father. The letterhead was from a law firm I didn't recognize. The title at the top was stark and brutal: Declaration of Incapacity and Voluntary Appointment of Guardianship. Below, there was a paragraph of dense legalese, and then a signature line. On that line, in a shaky, uncertain hand that looked like a cruel forgery of my grandmother's elegant script, was the name Eleanor Carter. "Oh, God, Ethan," I breathed, staring at the screen. Seeing it there, in black and white, made it brutally real. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This was a premeditated crime. "They already had her sign it." "I don't think so," he said, zooming in on the signature. "Look at the ink. It's different from the notary's stamp at the bottom, which isn't signed or dated yet. I think this is a draft, or maybe one they practiced on. They were waiting until after the cake, after the big public display of her confusion. They needed to seal the deal in front of their paid witnesses. The cold, calculated evil of it was breathtaking. They had thought of everything, but they hadn't thought of Ethan." He looked at me, his face set like stone. "This is our proof. Pictures of the surveillance wiring, the sedatives, and the document they're trying to force her to sign. This is what we take to the police." He scrolled to his contacts and found the non-emergency number for the local police department in my hometown. He took a deep breath, and I watched as my quiet, thoughtful husband transformed into the most formidable man I had ever known. He pressed the call button. When a dispatcher answered, his voice was calm, clear, and utterly convincing. "Hello," he said. "My name is Ethan Miller. I need to report a crime in progress. It's an active case of elder abuse, fraud, and unlawful sedation. Yes, I have photographic evidence. The address is 114 Maple Drive. My wife and I are at the gas station on the corner of Route 5 and Miller Road. We are waiting for you." I listened, my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm. The fear was still there, but it was being overshadowed by a new, powerful emotion, the unwavering certainty that we were doing the right thing. The fight had begun. Waiting for the police was the longest 15 minutes of my life. We sat in the car under the harsh gas station lights, the doors locked, watching every car that passed. I half expected my father's SUV to pull into the lot, to see his enraged face through the window. But the only vehicle that arrived was a marked police cruiser. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a graying mustache and a weary look in his eyes. The other was younger, sharp-featured and alert. They approached our car cautiously. Ethan rolled down his window. "Mr. Miller?" the older officer asked. "Yes, officer." "Thank you for coming so quickly." We got out of the car, and Ethan, in the same calm, factual voice he'd used on the phone, laid out the entire story. He showed them the photos on his phone. I watched the younger officer's expression shift from professional skepticism to focused intensity as he looked at the picture of the Declaration of Incapacity. "This was tonight?" he asked. "Yes," I said, finding my voice. It's my grandmother's 85th birthday party. They're all still there. My father, Richard Carter, and my sister, Vanessa Carter. The older officer looked at me, his gaze softening with a hint of sympathy. This is a serious accusation, ma'am. I know, I said, my voice steady. And it's all true. They are drugging my grandmother to steal her estate. After a brief, quiet conference between themselves, the older officer made a decision. All right, we're going to go over to the house and perform a wellness check on your grandmother. We'd like you to come with us, but you stay in the car unless we call you out. Understood? Understood, we both said. The drive back to my childhood home, following a police car, was surreal. The streets were quiet and dark. There were no flashing lights, no sirens. It was a silent, stealthy return. As we turned back onto Maple Drive, I could see the house at the end of the street. Most of the cars were gone. The party was over. The balloons tied to the railing now looked deflated and sad. The officers parked a little down the street and had us wait while they walked up the stone path. I watched them knock on the front door. After a moment, it opened and my father stood there, silhouetted in the warm light of the hallway. I saw his body go rigid with shock. Vanessa appeared behind him, her face a mask of confusion that quickly morphed into outrage. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could see the animated gestures. My father's indignant pointing, my sister's hands flying up in a gesture of disbelief. But the officers were implacable. After a tense few minutes, my father and sister stepped aside, and the police entered my home. This was the worst part. Waiting, trapped in the car, imagining the scene unfolding inside. Was Grandma okay? Had they hidden the evidence? Would they be able to lie their way out of this? After what felt like a lifetime, the younger officer came back out and walked to our car. He leaned down to the window. "We've spoken to your grandmother," he said, "and we've found the documents you photographed, along with the pill bottles in the kitchen. The notary is still here and he's very cooperative. Says he was told this was all prearranged and agreed upon." He paused. "Paramedics are on their way to assess your grandmother's condition. She seems lucid but very weak and confused." Tears of relief streamed down my face. Did she say anything?" The officer's expression was grim. "We showed her the document. We asked her if she understood it and if the signature was hers. She looked at it for a long time." He took a deep breath. "Then she looked right at your father and said, clear as a bell, 'I didn't agree to anything.' I never signed those papers, Richard." That was it. The truth in her own voice. The one voice they had tried so hard to silence. A few minutes later, the front door opened again. This time, my father and sister were escorted out, their hands cuffed behind their backs. The transformation was shocking. My father, who had been the proud, beaming host just hours before, looked shrunken and gray. His face was a mask of disbelief and fury. Vanessa was weeping, her perfect makeup ruined, her champagne-colored dress looking cheap and crumpled. She looked at our car as they led her away, her eyes filled with a venomous hatred that chilled me to the bone. They didn't say a word. They were put into the back of the cruiser, the door shutting on them with a solid, final thud. The officer motioned for us. "You can come in now. The paramedics are with her." Ethan and I got out of the car, our legs unsteady. We walked into the house. The party decorations looked garish and mocking in the aftermath. In the living room, two paramedics were talking quietly to my grandmother, who was wrapped in a thick blanket. She looked up as I entered the room. Her eyes, though still hazy, found mine. A single tear traced a path down her wrinkled cheek. I rushed to her side, falling to my knees and taking her hand. It was still cold, but I held on tight. "I'm here, Grandma," I wept, pressing her hand to my cheek. "I'm here." "It's over." She squeezed my hand. A real squeeze this time, a connection restored. And in the wreckage of my family, in the quiet aftermath of the ugliest betrayal I could ever imagine, that small gesture of love was the only thing that mattered. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, doctor's appointments, and quiet rebuilding. The story of what my father and sister had tried to do sent a shockwave through our extended family. A sordid drama played out in hushed phone calls and whispers. Richard and Vanessa were charged with multiple felonies, including attempted fraud and elder abuse. They were released on bail, but the perfect world they had constructed for themselves had been irrevocably shattered. I chose not to attend any of the preliminary hearings. Ethan and I hired a lawyer for my grandmother, a kind but fiercely competent woman who handled everything. I refused to give my father and sister any more of my energy. Showing up in court to watch them squirm felt like revenge, and I discovered I had no appetite for it. Seeing them led away in handcuffs had not brought me joy, only a profound, hollowing sadness for the family I never had. My silence, I decided, would be my statement. I would leave their fate to the justice system. My focus, my entire world, was now my grandmother. We moved her out of that house, a place now tainted with the memory of that night. We found her a beautiful, sunlit apartment in a senior living community, just 10 minutes from our own home. I spent days helping her pack up the real treasures of her life, her photo albums, her collection of worn paperback novels, the hand-knitted blankets, the little trinkets and keepsakes that held her memories. We left the staged furniture, the soulless decorations, and the ghosts of that night behind. Slowly, with proper medical care, and without the sedatives clouding her mind, Grandma Eleanor began to return to us. Her wit grew sharper, the light came back to her eyes, and her memory, which they had tried to weaponize against her, became clear once more. She never spoke about that night, and I never asked her to. There was no need to relive the trauma. Our time together was about the future, not the past. We would sit in her new living room, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, and she would tell me stories of her own childhood. We baked bread in her new, smaller kitchen, her hands stronger now, guiding mine just as they had when I was a child. We were not just granddaughter and grandmother. We were survivors, building a new, smaller, but infinitely stronger family on a foundation of truth and love. One afternoon, months later, my mother, who had been a silent, passive participant in my father's life for decades, called me. Her voice was thin, broken. She told me my father had taken a plea bargain. My sister, defiant to the end, had not. The legal battle would drag on for her. My mother spoke of shame, of regret, of not knowing how bad things had gotten. I listened, but I felt a quiet distance. The time for her to speak up had long since passed. I was polite, but I offered no absolution. Forgiveness was a complex thing, and I was saving all of mine for myself and for the woman who had truly raised me. That evening, I sat with Ethan on our small balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Do you think they'll ever understand what they did?" I asked quietly. Ethan took my hand. "I don't know. Maybe not. But that's their burden to carry, not yours. You did the right thing, Rachel. You saved her." I looked out at the horizon, at the fading light. They had tried to erase her voice, to sign away her life in the flickering candlelight of a fake celebration. They had tried to make her invisible, but she spoke. And I had listened. I would never ignore my instincts again. I would never mistake silence for peace or cruelty for family tradition. Because family may betray you, but love, real love, is worth protecting. It is the only thing worth fighting for. If this story gripped you, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. More shocking stories are coming.